Okay, humans, it's time to animate. Um, where do we begin, really? I'm gonna use this empty default scene in order to explain some basic things, but you need to understand that animation is just like rigging and really a lot of the creative process on Maya. Like it's not set in stone. For example, unlike programming where you have some best practices, there's really no such thing in Maya. Whereas this is how it has to be done, except a few topological and modeling workflows that you should adhere to in order to get a better quality result. When it comes to animation, a lot of this depends on your project, on your requirement, on what you need for your game. And for example, if you wanted to animate a jump, if this was a horror game, the jump would be very slow. So you would need to animate it in such a manner that it would feel sluggish to the player. But if you are like creating a platformer, right, the jump needs to be fast, responsive, sharp. You can't just allow yourself to be like, yeah, well, I'm gonna give him like 120 frame like jump, and he'll not like don't do that, right? So what we're gonna do now is I just want to go through some of the like how animation works in Maya, because it like even though it sounds very simple, and I think it is very simple, it's still good to go through these things just to be 100% sure that we're on the same page here. So without further ado, we need to modify our working space here. So what I'm going to do is get rid of the help line and the command line and open up the time slider. Okay, so here on the time slider, we have numbers, which go from 1 to 30. Not a big observation there. And these represent our frames. It is imperative that you understand the fact that this is not your frame rate. As in, no, this is your frame. Well, okay, this is the maximum frames that you could have right now, okay, in the scene. So if we start animating anything here, and we go from the first frame to the 30th frame, um, like we can't go above 30 right now. It's essentially like a video, right? This video has a particular length. You slide your, your time slider, and you go to a particular point in the video. Okay, you can go instantly to the end. You can go instantly to the minute, to the beginning. You can pick and choose where exactly you want to go. This is exactly the same thing. Okay, think of this as time. These are not frames per second. These are actual frames. Okay, the frames per second bit is your actual frame rate, in which case this is your playback speed. So if I decided, okay, I'm gonna like make sure that this is played back at 30 frames per second, which means that right now on this bar I have 1 second of time. Okay, this is important. 30 frames, if played back at 30 frames per second, equal 1 second. All right. So that being said, does that mean that I only have 1 second of time to animate here? Not really, no. In the engine, it is fairly easy and simple to extend, like to speed up an animation or slow it down by the very nature of the way animation works. For example, if I had anything that, if I animated something in 30 frames and I said, okay, well, I'm gonna, like, I need it to be faster, so I need to double the playback speed. Um, but if I double the playback speed, I will double the playback speed for everything. But in my situation, maybe I just want my jump to be twice as fast because I realized that my timing was garbage when I was making my platformer, and it turned out that it plays like a horror game. So you want to speed up your jump. So what you do is basically you tell the engine, right, I want you to multiply this by 2, and it'll essentially cut in between a frame, and it'll speed up the jump. At least that's what it does. Depends what you're doing. All right, a lot of these things depend on what you're doing. But what we're missing here is some kind of a slider, right? Because what if we want to go above 30? This over here, by the way, represents your current frame. So if I go to 15, it'll put me on 15. It doesn't seem like a big help right now, but if you have thousands and thousands of frames, this might be very useful, especially depending on what kind of stuff you've got on your time slider here. And by the way, that's important. This is a time slider. Okay, this is your time slider. This is not your frames per second, like I already said. So just get that into your head that right here you've got something which represents time. It could be seconds, it could be frames, it could be anything. Right, let's pop off the time slider, the range slider as well. The range slider is quite simple in its function, and that it allows you to slide between a particular set of frames. Boom, suddenly we've got even more frames. Now we have 2 seconds worth of time in our frames. So let's just go over the time slider real quick. Sorry, the range slider. I always confuse these. On the right hand side over here, you've got your current range. So currently we're going between 30 and 60. Okay, this is your maximum here, right? Notice if I drag this, I will lower my maximum that I can view over here, right? So the lower this number is, the more detail I'm going to have on my time slider. So your range slider controls the resolution of your time slider. And of course you can move it left and right, or you could just jump to the frame that you want. Another case, in this case, would be 55, which we will not see, however, because again, we are not on our range sliders, like it's not corresponding. So what we could do is we could either increase the sensitivity or do something else. Obviously, you could fit the whole thing here and just eliminate the need for a time slider entirely, which is a valid course of action. Another thing to notice here on the range slider is these frames over here. So this represents your first frame. Let's say if I just write 5, my first frame is going to be 5, right? The moment I go all the way down here, I'm going to start at frame 5 no matter what. If I start at frame 0, I'm going to have a frame 0. Now usually it's better to start at frame 1. You don't want to zero this out. And obviously this represents your current frame. Not the current frame, but the position of this little gadget here. So you could think of this as this is your minimum and this is your maximum of your view. Okay, this is your minimum resolution and your maximum. No, actually, this is a bad example. This is basically your resolution. I can't even put this in better terms, but you have 10 here and you're gonna see 10 here. Okay, you got 34 here and you're gonna see 34 here at the max. Therefore, your resolution is 24 frames right now because you're looking between 34 and 10, which is 24 frames, which is not even a second. Okay, so essentially, I usually just leave this. I don't use these numbers a lot. I prefer to use the slider, and I leave it at something like something like this. Usually I go in 10 frame increments so that I can just have a better idea. But sometimes I could go in 15 or even 20. Now, obviously, this is a personal decision. You don't have to go to, you don't have to copy my workflow here at all. Now, there are some other things like the time slider and the time editor and the graph editor, and these things require a lot of real estate. So we're not gonna go through them just yet. And I believe this should be able to. I should be able to lift this up. I don't know why I'm not getting the little hint here. Yeah, for some weird reason, these things don't stack too well right now. Let me just pop this and put it over here. Now, am I gonna get this? Very strange indeed. I have to dig around why this. Oh, there we go. Oh, god damn it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this makes a little bit more sense when we go into our when we start talking about our graph editor and the time editor. And there's loads of these animation editors, but I'm going to hide them for now. And I'm going to talk about the preferences here. Now notice that there's also, before we go into preferences, there's also an animation layer and an auto key toggle. Now whenever we animate, anything we do to an object, we can key it to a particular frame. Basically, you're binding a state, you're binding some value to the time. Okay, so if I just open up the channel box here, and let's say I create a, I don't know, a cube. A simple cube. I'm going to create it over here. Now, it's got a bunch of these little transforms here, like translate X, Y, and Z, rotate, scale. It's got attributes which we can keep. In other words, we can bind to a particular frame. Okay, so we're not going to do that just yet. I just want you to understand that whenever we animate these values here or any other values in Maya, any other value in Maya will be bound to this slider here, to our animation layer. Okay, and this is how it all works. This is the time, this is the changeable variable, and it will change according to time. Whenever we keyframe things, by the way, we'll talk about keys later. Let's just go back into our little small world here. Oh, the animation, by the way, I wanted to say that there's animation layers. We probably won't go into them because of our project isn't that complex. But basically, how it works like is, if you've ever used Photoshop in your life, this is exactly how animation layers work. Difference being, unlike the display layers, which we've already used before, which are, you just turn them on, turn them off. They don't exactly stack the way the Photoshop layers do. In other words, look, if you're not a Photoshop user, basically it means that in Photoshop you can stack layers. So if you had a flower layer 1, okay, let's say, I'm going to create a visual idea of how it works in Photoshop so that you can understand how it works. It works with animations, because I'm not going to do it with animations just yet. So I'm just going to create a couple of planes over here, and I believe I have a front view here, or a side view. No, let's use the front view. All right, so I've got these. I should probably flip the normals on that thing, but who cares? I'm just going to extrude it, might as well. All right, so we've got this object here. And let's say this is layer 1. All right, we're looking at layer 1 right now. Difference is that this is let's say this is the bottom layer. Okay, and once we create another object on another layer, it immediately replaces the object at the bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and move this out so that this is a little bit more visible. And I'm going to go into the attribute editor, into the Phong. Am I in the Phong right now? Yeah. And I'm going to change the color to green. I will change the color to green. Not for both of them, for crying out. Oh, yes, I duplicated them, of course. They're using the same material. Oh, boy. Do I really need to create this now? Okay, fine. Let's do this. Let's go gung-ho on this. So I got 3 layers. I'm going to duplicate this one more time. I'm going to scale this up. Right. I'm going to grab this, add to layer 1. Grab this, add to layer 2. Grab this, add to layer 3. I'm going to assign different colors to them. So blue. What, really? Seriously? I'm going to have to do this the hard way? Okay. Just go with this crap thing. Right, let's go back into our layer editor here. I'll assign this red and assign this green. Now this should not create troubles for our object once I go into wireframe mode. All right, this will work just fine. So notice what's happening here on the layers. I should probably go into shading mode, go wireframe here. So notice what happens here. In reality, we got 3 objects. Imagine this is Photoshop. In reality, we've got 3 objects which are overlapping each other. However, the lowest layer, which is layer number 1, is at the bottom of the stack, which means that it is behind all other layers. So in reality, you wouldn't really see layer number 1 because everything else is overlapping it. So the same thing goes for layer number 2 because this is overlapping it. Now, the interesting bit comes that in Photoshop, you can, blend between these layers and be like, yeah, something's going to come through from the blue one, and it's going to bleed into the red one, and that bit is going to have like the mask or just cut out so that you see just this bit, for example. right? A little bit of the blue, a little bit of the red, and the green, and this creates this 3D effect or whatever it is you're after in Photoshop. The same thing is basically happening with the animation layers. The only difference being, I'm just going to delete these losers now because we don't need them, and oops, and also delete these layers because we also don't need them. Oh, really? Gonna have to delete this the hard way? Okay, I don't know the shortcut for this, though. This is gonna be quite annoying indeed. All right, there we go. It's deleted. Okay, so the same thing is happening with the animations. When you got something like an idle animation and your character just breathing, and you could say, right, I'm gonna add to this that the character is coughing. But because your character is not going to be coughing all the time, or you may have several different ideas about how a cough should, should go about, a character should go about a cough, you're going to have different animation sets. In other words, layers, which will help you with your objective. And you can either blend them together. In other words, if you had 2 or 3 variations, you could basically overlap. In other words, let's say you have an animation where your character coughs, and then he coughs and he sneezes, and then you had a cough where he coughs just with his hand and covers his mouth, or he coughs and just pukes his guts out. So you got all these different coughs, which are basically the same thing. However, they will add on top of each other the same way I just showed you with the objects, with the planes that I extruded. Obviously, you could override it and be like, yeah, man, this gonna be the hard style hardcore where you don't see shit from the bottom, right? You basically say, okay, whatever's at the top, that's the final version. So you're gonna have to do everything there from scratch. You can't reuse your previous work unless you use some fancy scripts. Of course, you could just blend between them. But at the end of the day, you're going to learn this as you progress yourself. It's not a very difficult thing to come to terms with, just principally. Like, I haven't made much use of the animation layers myself, but, I've just played around with them a little bit. But I never had to use them, all right? Because as a game developer, you don't have the time to be creating so many different options, If you were a freelancer, we're just working with animation, and someone asked you, hey man, I need you to animate some guy coughing, you'd be like, yeah dude, all right, I'm gonna give you like 15 different ways a person can cough animated, and I'm gonna switch in between, and you just pick and choose whichever one you want. All right, in reality, you don't have that luxury because the time is a constraint, which you have to basically abide to your limits. Okay, now let's continue where we left off. I'm sorry about this little tangent here, but I just wanted to explain to you how layers work, because you might find yourself, depending on what you do, that you may need a layer. And obviously this allows you to select said layer if we've created any, right? You can create some layers over there on the right side and just select here whichever one you want. I'm going to skip the auto key one for now, and I'm going to go straight into preferences. Now here in the settings, notice that this is the time slider side, all right? This is not the animation bit in the settings, where here basically everything you do is, here's the auto key, by the way, which I find fascinating, which is not part of the time slider for some reason. Now these settings here, I really know only half of them, what they do, and in all honesty, you probably don't need to edit these because they're fairly, like, unless you run into a problem, you don't need to go digging into this. The only thing you should edit yourself is the actual time slider. So here we go. I'm gonna go from bottom to top, by the way, because I believe it's more. It just makes a little bit more sense. So here at the playback speed, this is the important bit. All right. You could basically play it at half the speed, twice the speed, or in every frame, which is like 1 frame per second, or other. Like, you could specify how fast you want to be playing your how fast the playback of your animation you want to be. Remember, this is your frame rate, but this is not the frame rate in the game. This is your frame rate in Maya. Okay, this is how fast you're gonna see this animation playing back. This is not how fast your animation actually is. Okay, so just look, leave this at 30 FPS. All right, this doesn't mean that when you say something, when you put something in 30 FPS over here, that it'll only look right at 30 FPS in the engine. All right, don't worry about it. If you ideally you want to hit the 60 FPS target, just as a safe practice, right? I mean, if you're making a puzzle game, probably not. But in any situation, in a puzzle game on on current hardware, you'll probably be hitting way more than 60 anyway. Okay, so once that we got the playback speed at 30 FPS, just keep it at 30 FPS, all right? The reason being is that the 30 FPS is a little bit more natural. It's easier to get an idea of how something is going to move at 30 FPS versus 60, because it's the reason people use 60 FPS is due to the refresh rate on monitors, and when you flick something across the screen like a mouse and it goes like boom, like when you see this kind of ridiculous. Well, my mouse is rickety. I think one of my buttons is trying to act up. But basically, when you have all this movement here, you need your screen to be refreshing very fast. I mean, my mouse right now, I can barely follow it with my eyes, as in precisely, right? This kind of movement, it's hard to follow it when it's going so fast. So this is the reason. That's why you usually want higher frames per second on fast-paced action games. Right, once we go up here, we got the looping bit. I'd say it's fairly self-explanatory. You can either play the animation that you have on the graph once. In other words, the slider goes from 1 till whatever you've set it up to the max, which is 60 in this situation. So you got 60 frames. I'm going to go back down to 30 just for the heck of it. I'm just going to max this damn thing out. So we got 30 frames. After that, we've got the oscillate bit, which basically means that your time slider, your animation is going to go from 1 to 30, then from 30 to 1, then from 1 to 30, 30 to 1, basically going back and forth like that. It is a loop, okay? And then obviously you got the continuous, which is going to go from 1 to 30, and then going to start from 1 to 30, 1 to 30, 1 to 30, without going backwards in frames. Okay, after that, you've got the app update view, keep it at active. Now the tick span bit is, like right now it's not important because essentially basically like once you start zooming out how fat it is. The key tick size, this is important. Honestly, I mean, probably make it like 2 pixels. This is in pixels, by the way. So like it's between 1 and 5 because these things like these small red lines, probably make it 2 pixels. 1 is a little bit too small, I think. After that, you've got the playback start and end. In our case, this is your basically in terms of basically this is this. All right, this is what it is over here. So you don't need these settings right now. The height bit is interesting because you can modify the height of your time slider in order to see better what you're doing, in case you got some audio files or whatever. But we don't have any. We're not going to use any audio files, so we could care less about this. We also should have our key ticks to active over here, which is the default, I believe. I really don't know why this is set to none. Or maybe none is the default. I don't know. Leave it at none. But essentially, this shows you. It depends. Like if you click the object, and it's going to show you the key ticks for only that object or something like that. I'm not too sure what the default was. Let's go. Actually, let's use the help here and go into. What the hell? Get away. Can't even get the freaking edge thing. So we go into our time slider preferences over here, and it's going to tell us exactly what none means. Yeah, well, there we go. So we want active. We want the active bit. So we want to see our keyframes. So there we go. Active it is. Save all this stuff. And a good thing I freaking checked it, because if I started keyframing and there were no freaking ticks here, it would be weird. Right, so what we're going to do now is essentially make a simple keyframe. In other words, I'm going to create a cone, and holy cojones, right? No, maybe not a cone. I can't be bothered with this thing right now. Let's just create a cube. I really should reset the settings on a lot of these primitives. So I've created a cube and I want it to move. I'm going to snap it here to the grid. Okay, maybe I'm just going to snap this over here, and I'm going to snap this to the grid. Okay, so what I'm going to use the increments here basically to move this. Right, and I'm gonna scale this up. So we've got something to that we can basically see right now. Okay, so let's just keyframe some things. Let's keyframe something. Like, let's move this object from the beginning of the grid to the end of the grid. Very simple. What do we have to do? Well, we got several options. Anything we do, like to set a key, we need to press S. Okay, so if I press S right now, notice that everything turns red, which means that at keyframe number 1, okay, at our frame number 1, this object's all of this objects, I gotta really disable my Windows key during these sessions. All of my attributes here have been keyed to this first frame, right? Basically the software has remembered what the situation is right here. So I'm gonna grab my object and I'm gonna move it. Oops, maybe I should have used just the one axis, would have been nice. And I'm gonna press another key, but here I'm gonna press it on 30. Maybe I should have done this earlier. It's a little bit late. I'm starting to lose my focus here. But essentially, we have changed now the state of our object. And I'm going to press S again. Now, what had just happened? Let's just think about this for a second. What just happened? I've gone from one point to another. And what did my... like, does this really count as animation? Because in my mind, it does not. Like, any logical person will say, well, dude, you just showed Maya that you moved your object from one point to another. How is this going to work? Essentially, Maya's going to say, right, what is going to interpolate between these 2 points in order to get a movement. So if I go ahead and go to frame 1 and I start sliding it, you will notice that as I slide it, the position of my object changes until I hit the end of my animation. So if I press play, this should happen within a second. And it does. It does. Now let's go ahead and oscillate this, just for the heck of it, just for fun. Let's oscillate this. See what happens. See how the oscillation works. So there we go. We go from left to right, from left to right. This is enough to drive you nuts if you like just go ahead and start looking at it. I believe I have to update. There we go. There we go. There you go. This is the definition of your life. You're just doing nothing, going nowhere, back and forth. But anyway, as much as captivating as this is to watch, we have to stop this for a second here and go back and make this into continuous, because I do believe usually when you're like looking at an animation, in order to get a good grip on what the hell you've done, you want to be just looking at it several times so that you know what you're doing. Okay, so you might say, well, this is very fascinating, but this does not really represent the type of animation that I was looking for. Yeah, it doesn't it's not a fancy animation, but this right here, my friends, this right here is exactly what animating is. This is all you do, okay? With a few little more modifiers, a couple of more editors. In reality, this is all that animation is. You basically grab an object, drag it around your scene. You tell Maya, hey, this is where I want it to be. And Maya's going to be like, cool. So from now on, instead of being down here, your object is going to be going all the way up there. Very simple. So now you've changed your animation. You might say as well, what about if I want to have a more diverse path? Well, that's very simple as well. You can just grab this object, put it over here, and go to frame number 16, which right now the object, well, let's go in 15, which should be right in the middle of its path. I'm going to put it over here and press S. Now I have another keyframe. And now if I play this from start, go all the way from start and press play, my object is going to go in both of these states. Very simple. Same thing goes for anything really. I mean, just go nuts, okay? We're in frame 23 right now. We could say that we want this to be bigger. And this is what this is, 7 from the end. So we need 7 from the start. And just set the key here. Go 7 from the start. We make it smaller. Okay, set the key here. And now we've got, if we go from the start as well, we should be able to have something that does, basically grows and shrinks and does something weird. Okay. you could also use this for rotation. Let's say I want to rotate the cube 90 degrees over here. I'm gonna rotate this 90 degrees in some strange fashion. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know what I'm gonna be rotating this right now. But let's say I rotate this at random, and I put a keyframe over here. This is 9, so I'm gonna go to 21, and I'm gonna rotate it like this. I don't even know, like this. Right now, I'm just going completely random. So, you know, in reality, I'm not really doing anything fancy. By the way, if you notice me matching frames, that's not because it has to be done. It's just that I like symmetry, so I just have this weird thing for symmetry. Anyway, so let's see what happened. There we go. So now our object is rotating, and it's basically going from one to another, from one state to another. Now, this is not very fluid. You will notice that as we start adding keyframes, things are starting to get erratic, right? It's not very... It's not pretty to look at. I mean, you could look from left to right. It would make a little bit of sense. But now we got all of these attributes changing. It's a little bit ridiculous. So what we can do, if we decide, okay, let's say on frame number 15, instead of it being over here, because you see, we could always do something else. We could always change just one attribute. Let's say I wanna go to translate X. I'm gonna move it over here. And obviously, this is the only thing that I will keyframe because that's the only thing that changed. But you can keyframe individual things, such as only the translate. Now, in this situation, this doesn't really help much because if I keyframe it, it will still remember everything because we're working with everything. But if I create a new object, this will be a lot easier. So let's just play this timeline for the last time and see what happens. So this is our final animation. Completely random, totally weird type deal that doesn't make much sense, of course. Obviously, this is, again, a completely random thing. But you can play this with this yourself. Just notice how Maya reacts as you keep adding different keyframes, because obviously eventually you will max out. You could say, well, you know, the best type of animation is the hand keyframed animation, and the hand keyframe animation is the stuff that counts. In other words, like you could basically say at every single frame where you want your object to be. And this is how it used to be. You know, the flip books? You know, the flip books? Well, that's what it is. You basically frame it in, and the result is, you know, each and every frame with a little bit of difference in between, and that's how you get your animations. That's how they used to make all these Mikeys and all that. Also, notice the color of these channel boxes. Here, these frames are indeterminate, okay? These frames are basically calculated by Maya. That's why their color is pink. I don't know why they decided pink was the best possible way to represent this. But by the way, you can change these. I believe you could go into preferences over here. For some reason, I'm not finding this. I think that, like, I'm pretty positive, almost 100% positive there was a way to change. Oh yeah, yes, of course. In the animation display layer here, I'm sorry, it's just 5 o'clock in the morning. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this right now, but in the animation layer editor here, you can basically specify the color of the animation, of the layer, the same way you specified on the display layer. Remember, if we create a new one, and we could actually select the color of it. Same way you could do this with animations, but instead of changing the color of the selection, such as if we go ahead and add this right now and make this, I don't know, green. No, it's already green, so let's make it red. And I'm going to add this selection here. This should make the selection red, which it does not for some reason. And that is very annoying for me right now. Even the wireframes now, oh, there we go. Okay, because I've selected it, of course. So if I make this like that, I deselect it. Yeah. Anyway, point is that this is how you can change the pips over here, the ticks, from being red into whatever color you want. Now notice here that Maya has been interpolating these all the time. It means that only the red ones are the ones that count, okay? This is red. It means that I've said it personally. I've decided to go out of my way and tell Maya, hey, this is an important frame, It is a key frame. All right, understand what I'm saying? It is a key frame to my animation. And in order for it to work on this frame, frame number 9, my object must be in this and this position with such and such attributes, okay, with this much scale or whatever it is I'm changing over here. Obviously, there's other things we can do. I'm going to show them to you a little bit later. But before we conclude this video, I just want to go over the auto keyframe thing. So I'm going to delete this schmuck. And I'm going to create a new... I don't know why I'm starting to space these things out. I think I'm losing my mind at this point. Maybe need a little bit of sleep, perhaps. Okay, so we've got our little cube again. I'm going to probably scale this guy out like so. And what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to activate the auto key thing. I'm going to just move this a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to create the same animation with no keyframing. Now you might say, well, you know, you're not going to save a lot of work considering you had to press your, you know, you have to press S once, right, to keyframe it here, and then S again here, and you got 2 keyframes. Big deal. Yeah, but at some point you might use this. Now this, I really don't find this useful. I've never been a fan of the auto keyframing thing, just because if you decide to by accident do something weird, it just goes all to shit, and usually this thing creates way too many keyframes just to keep track of. So I don't know, some people use it. I don't like it. Let me just put it on. So click on it, and now we're moving. So let's go ahead and let's say this is keyframe number 1. So I'm gonna move this over here, and keyframe number 2, move this over here. Actually, I think I needed to press something. See, I don't even use this, so I'm not too sure. I don't know. I'll have to take a look at this later, man, because this is... I'm not sure why it's been... Oh, there we go. There we go. Finally, it's been keyframing things. So if we go into a particular frame right now, it will keyframe them for us. Okay, so I really don't know why it's decided to start working after. But essentially, I'm doing some weird things right now. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. So just select this, select keyframe number 8, move it automatically. Keyframed, select frame number 30, which is our final position. Move our object over here. There we go. Finally keyframed as well. So they were keyframed, I just didn't see them. Let's go to frame number 1, which for some reason is here, and we're gonna go back over here. So this is gonna be erratic at the very least. And actually, this is a little, oops, sorry. This is a little bit better than I expected. It's not the same as before. So this is actually pretty good. This is actually pretty good. Yeah, you might as well use this when you get the chance. Even though the only difference between this and pressing the S key on your keyboard is that it requires you to press the S key on the keyboard, okay? Because the auto keyframing thing, it already does it. Maya already animates these keyframes. It already creates them for you, right? See here? And by the way, notice that when I go over these keyframes right now, notice that only the things that have changed from my initial keyframe, which is keyframe number 10, I believe. This is the one I framed in, have been keyframed. Okay, I'm repeating keyframes so often that I think I'm losing my my speech patterns here. But what's important is that we only have 2 frames keyed in right now, meaning that Maya does the rest. On the ones that we've done manually, obviously everything is in. You can, of course, frame only the 1 bit. You could say, right, we're going to start. I'm going to frame just the first thing, and this is somehow going to work for us. Let's say here I'm just going to frame the scale. I don't know, something like this, and press S, but it'll frame everything because I'm doing this manually. I believe there was no way to actually frame only this 1 thing as it is right now. Or maybe I just don't remember. You'll have to excuse me if I don't, because I'm just trying to... I think I should finish this video as soon as possible. Okay, let's see what we've done, and let's get it over with for next time. I don't even think that this thing is gonna... Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. See, this is what happens when you got something that is playing too fast and you got too few frames for it. So how do we play this back slower? Well, very simple. Let me stop this, open up the preferences, and we're gonna play it back at half the speed. Let's play this back at half the speed. Now see what happens. Suddenly, this is gonna seem a lot more fluid, even though it isn't. In this case, we simply don't have enough keyframes. We simply don't have enough frames in our time slider to support such an erratic difference in movements, because any animation usually is fluid. You don't have something going from here all the way to here and then going back to here and then like this and like that. I mean, you do, but you have several frames of it. In our situation, we've got, I mean, look at this. This is frame number 19. This is frame number 20, okay? And this is frame number 23, 26. So in 3 frames, okay, this is like, how many? This is a 33rd. No, yeah, a 33rd of a second. No, a 0.03 of a second. Okay, 3 frames. I think I'm losing my mind. But anyway, like this is a very short amount of time and very few frames to actually perform such a drastic change in you know, in distance of movement. So whenever you're keyframing in, you want to have enough keyframes on you. So obviously you can, you know, grab a frame and copy it, delete it, cut it, paste it, snap it. You've got all these. We're going to talk about this context sensitive menu in the next video, because you know there's just some pretty cool stuff here overall. And in the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, driven keys, and just go over these menus, by the way, because I'm going to follow the same format in the next videos. You know, how to, you know, basically pop off a menu. I'm going to start talking about these settings over here. We're going to go into playback, which really we don't need, as in, like, we could probably skip this entirely because obviously we have these controls over here, and we don't really need Play Blast unless you want to send your animation to someone. And since this is Maya LT, and because we're not going to be rendering stuff, like we're not going to make Shrek or something like that, like you really need only a basic set of tools in order to operate effectively. Then we got the visualize bit, which is our this is actually really cool. I really like this bit, like the, you know, the, I don't know about the turntable, never used that, I'll have to check this out, but I really like the editable motion trail. That's freaking amazing. I love the way it is. And the ghosting bit is also pretty cool. Like a lot of these visualizing, this whole visualizing thing is like, this is probably the best, the coolest menu in Maya, at least for me, because it does some really amazing things. It makes you work. It just looks cool. Okay, it's got a lot of cool things. Excuse me. And finally, we're not going to go over the deform and the constraint, because these should be familiar for you, right? Notice anything familiar? It comes right from here, okay? Oops. So there's a reason, by the way, that I did not completely skin our mesh, as I've already said before, because we're going to use animation in order to paint our skin weights correctly. We're going to use basically these keyframes. We're going to say, okay, we're going to grab our worm, in my situation, my worm, because you not necessarily have one. And I'm going to put, like, first keyframe is going to be like the default state, and then the 30th keyframe is going to be like the max, like the furthest away state. And then we're going to interpolate between them and see how the animation works, and, you know, keep painting the weights until we're happy with how it looks like. And instead of me just moving it every time, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, I think I just take a look from this side how it's going to pose, or this how it's going to pose. Obviously, we can use the animation the animation layers here, which might come in handy if we had more than one animation or more than one pose, but we have such a simple character that I really can't even think of a more than one pose for our worm, unless it's a snake or, like, I mean, it depends. Use your imagination, okay? It could be anything. I mean, you've played Worms Armageddon, hopefully, or you've seen what the 2K studio, the Team 17 has done with the Worms franchise. So, you know, imagination is king. Therefore, it's basically easier to operate when you've got a visual representation of, at least get an idea of the final product, of the final result of your animation. All right. Just before I finish, I want to say that when I say keyframing, in this situation, I grab the object itself, but if this was the um, if this was the skinned mesh, the one that we have, I would be grabbing the controls, as in, you know, the controls, the splines, all the stuff that we've created, the like in my situation, the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the center star. These are my controls, and I'd be keying them because their values are going to be the things that drive my you know, my rig, which is bound to which my mesh is bound to. Okay, therefore it's called a control rig. It allows me to control my skinned mesh. That's why you want to keyframe the control rig, because it's easier to grab something over here than a bunch of stuff in the middle. It just speeds up your workflow indefinitely, immensely, not indefinitely. Okay, I think I'm gonna be finishing for this video, guys. In the next video, we're gonna be talking, like I said, about the keyframing bit, especially the set driven key, which is a very cool little menu set. We got all the other keys, which are very easy to there we go. There's your individual channels. I completely forgot about this. But there's your individual channels which you can key in, and also you know, this is very similar to the constraints menu, a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna delete this, and I'm gonna just finish this whole video, because I think my mind is starting to shut down. Okay, I either need some sugar or some rest. So I'll see you guys in the next video when we start talking about, you know, going through these menus, of which there are only 3, and when we get to the visualize bit, oh my god, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be amazing. Obviously, after that, we're gonna go through the deform, just to show you how blend shapes and lattices and all that jazz works for an animation, how, as far as animation is concerned. And then we're gonna go back into our skin mesh. We're gonna paint the skin weights, right? We're gonna do the animation bit, and then we're gonna export, and from there on, we're gonna go into Unreal. I know it's been a long thing, but you know, that's the way things are, especially with Maya, because I'll talk to you once we finish about that. All right. Okay, you guys play around with these keyframes, and you know, if you're really daring, if you want to live on the edge, maybe go through a few of these menus yourself before you go on to the next video. Okay, because like I said, experimentation is key with these. Well, key, pun I guess intended. But experimentation is very important when it comes to Maya, because unlike programming, there is nothing set in stone. You know, when it comes to animating, rigging, and control rigs and all of that jazz, it depends on how you are. A little bit of, I guess, a little bit along your personality. I mean, I was, you know, trying to symmetrize my animation for whatever reason. Anyway, guys, that's it from me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.